Hello and welcome to Witness. I'm Raggy Omar. The celebrated war reporter Martha Gellhorn once wrote that there was nothing incomprehensible about war. It happens to families one by one, meaning that the true effects of a conflict can only really be seen from the perspective of ordinary people who have to live through it. Katia, a London-based filmmaker who grew up in Beirut, returned to Lebanon the day before Israel launched its war against Hezbollah. Much of the Western news coverage from the besieged Lebanese capital concentrated on the appalling statistics of the war. 1,200 civilians dead, a third of them children under 12, 400 miles of roads and 73 bridges destroyed, 350 schools blown up, and nearly 1 million people displaced. But this film goes beyond the statistics and vividly captures what it was like for individual Lebanese families to go through the month-long conflict, what it was like to decide to leave your home, the scramble to get out of the city, talking with your neighbors about when the bombing would begin again, and the desperate attempt to get a foreign visa to leave. This is the story of Katia and her family's experience in Beirut under siege.
The last time I was in Beirut, I was celebrating my marriage to my French man, Christian. Two months later, on July 11th, we returned to spend the summer there. But our holiday was short-lived. The next day, the city woke up to the news of Hezbollah's capture of 2 Israeli soldiers. Israel's response to Hezbollah was sudden and aggressive. They announced a full-scale war and promised to return Lebanon's clock back 20 years. Our home where I was born was in Beirut's southern suburbs, the center of which was a base for Hezbollah. If Israel was to attack Beirut, then this area would become an obvious target.
ما حش تفرق عشان العازب شرفي ما بدها هالقد ما لنا حرب ال10 سنين هلا نتركه يبين انه مهجور خلي في صور شيء اوكي طيب خلي بقى فيلمي بالكاراتيه.
We left to central Beirut, and from that moment the suburbs was to become a no-go area. Just hours after we left our home, the bombing started. Israel attacked Beirut's southern suburbs and knocked out Lebanon's only international airport. That day, 35 civilians died. I was 3 years old when Beirut first experienced war. But for my mom, her memories went much further back.
سنين الحرب كلياتها بيتنا المتنقل كان بالسيارة. إذا بتتذكري يمكن بعدين أنت بال48 يمكن كان عمري أنا 4 سنين، بتذكر مثل المنام لأنه أختي كانت عايشة بحيفا بفلسطين. بتذكر إنه أولاد أختي جايين هيك مهبرين وحالتهم حالة جايين لاجئين من مع اللاجئين اللي اجوا من فلسطين. هاي أول حرب أنا شفتها أنا وعمري 4 سنين. من عمري 4 سنين وأنا بحس إنه إسرائيل هي الدولة اللي عم بتحرق نفسنا من 48 لهلا. عدتي كم حرب ما فيني أعدهم أنا الحروب اللي أنا شاهدتهم من إسرائيل لحد هلا.
This is the bridge that leads to the airport. And this is where they bombed.
The main roads and bridges leading in and out of the city were destroyed.
It's really the most dangerous place. They're bombing this constantly.
And the airport remained under daily bombardments.
Don't get out, just stay from here, can you?
But it wasn't just driving here that was dangerous.
Hide your...
بيروت قدامك بنات ما تصوري عم بيكمشون كثير قبل ما تعمل اي شيء جيب الاذن.
احكي مع الشباب.
احكي مع حدا من الحزب. انتبه كمشوا 4 فرنساويين.
So far only the suburbs had been targeted. But 3 days later
هذا مروان انا بدخنه وكنت هون اصلا بدخنه طلع I see the smoke.
Israel attacked Beirut's only lighthouse in the heart of the city. With a total air and sea blockade now imposed on Lebanon, foreign governments started calling their citizens to evacuate.
You going back home?
No, I want to go to Canada.
Thousands of people managed their way out, but the majority of the Lebanese had no choice but to stay. For the first few days, I kept on postponing the decision whether to stay or leave. But of course, my mom wanted us to get the hell out immediately. Reluctantly, Christian and I went to register our names at the French embassy. We were told that there were no immediate plans for evacuation, and don't call us, we'll call you. We were now stuck in limbo in a city under siege. But the Lebanese had learned from previous wars how to take advantage of every single moment of peace.
صحيح قيمة الحياة مرة نضطر غصبا عننا نلاقي زاوية نقعد فيها. عم تحكي صحيح شمس بقعد هون فايلة إلي وبنشيل البضاعة بقدر يعني.
After 1 week, more than 200. It was getting more and more frustrating hearing the night bombs and imagining what it would be like on the receiving end.
اليوم ما بينراح
ماما حبيبتي خلينا نروح هلا بكير، نحن مع واحد بيشتغل بالجيش بيعرف حاله شو عم يعمل.
بس خليني اقول لك ما بيعرف قد ما انا بعرف، لأقول لك ليه؟ مجرد ما يقوم الطيران ويحوم حوالين الضاحيه ما عم بيكذب، بيكون بده يضرب.
اذا ما قضيناها هلا بالهدنه ما حنقدر نقضيها.
فيش هدنه اليوم مش عاطينهم هدنه اليوم. طيب خليني اروح معكم انا.
Elle veut venir avec nous. ماما فيني اعمل شيء بلا معناتها امي ما بنراجع.
كاتيا اذا صار لك شيء شو بصير فيي انا؟
بعرف اكيد ماما ما حيصير لي شيء.
مش بزعل عليكي، بحقد عليكي اذا صار لك شيء.
It probably was dangerous, but I wanted to go beyond the airport into the suburbs and see how badly our old neighborhood had suffered. These were the streets where I grew up. Normally, 750,000 people live in the suburbs. Now, even without entering the central danger zone, I felt I was in a ghost town.
فيك تفوتنا من حد بيتي بس اطمن لك كل شيء تمام، اذا بتلف وبترجع. ايه هيدا بيتي. الو ما في حدا.
I wondered where everybody had gone. I didn't have to look very hard to find them. By now, the number of refugees across Lebanon had reached 500,000. People from every background were occupying every empty space they could find in the city.
أنا بحب أروح على ألمانيا، لأنه ألمانيا فيها نظام، وهم ما في نظام.
نطلع بالتلفزيونات مبهدلين بهالشكل.
لك أنا شو عم بسوي حتى أرجو العالم كله إنه لك هالعيش اللي كنا واصلينها.
هونيك ألمانيا كيف الشغل بالحق بالأرض يعني الشارع، هون مش متعودين على هيك نحن.
عايشين بنعيم احنا بقى، ليك النعيم اللي عايشين.
وين هون بدي أعطيه حب وحنان بالصور.
The problem here, they are trying to implant in our soul this sectarian thinking. The American and the Israelis for their own benefit.
بشجع المقاومة أنا، بس المقاومة عندها نظام.
And it wasn't just the park. By now, every neighborhood school had been opened up to provide shelter. Here I met 10-year-old Zahra. She fled her home next to the airport and had already been in the school for a week.
أنا ما بخاف، أنا كنت بالبيت، بس كي يطلع صوت إبكي أغمى، ضل يفيقون شي 3 ساعات يفيقون. مش خايفين هن قالوا في حماية، إذا قصفوا ما عليه نضلنا دمنا المقاومة. لا الكهرباء تمشي فيه بس إنه التلفزيون ما عليه. يا ريت نحن كانوا يعملوا نشاطات إنه هاليوم زهقوا نزلوا اليوم. صرنا على سنة هيك نلعب نتفه بس قلنا يوم تاني بدنا نقلر درو نرسم شيء بنتمناه بحياتنا بس.
Lots of my generation, like my friend Maisa, a psychologist, grew up during the Lebanese civil war and now had an urge to help kids like Zahra.
لأنه وقت نزل القصف وهالقد هيك صار فيها الفوعة كلنا الفانتوم تبعونا نحن وصغار رجعوا طلعوا، وأول شيء كنا نعمله إنه نعمل شيء خاصه بالريباراسيون. ما حدا كان فاضي، الاهل ما كانوا فاضيين يحكوا عن شو عم بيصير للاولاد، كانوا لانه الاهل هن كمان كثير قلقانين وكثير خايفين، ويمكن في ناس ماتوا ناس من عائلتهم، تكسروا بيوتهم.
Maisa thought that the refugee kids were still in denial at this stage of the war. They didn't need therapy. What they needed was something much more simple.
ناس فاهمين لانه كثير الرسمات كثير حلوين، انه كثير هيك ما فيهم شيء كثير ريليتد للحرب. مين اعطاني الاحمر؟ صدى؟ ايه ما عليه روق.
But even here, the war was not far away.
When we come back, Katia is tormented by a decision she knows that she cannot avoid, whether to leave Beirut and her family.